Hi, everyone. Oh, thank you so much for joining us and being here with us today. Very special live interview. I'm really honored to be with the two of them right now. This is Akile Anai. Akile is chair of the Three Drowned Black Girls campaign at International People's Democratic Uhuru Movement, and Jesse Nevel is chair of Uhuru Solidarity Movement under the leadership of the African Socialist Party. We also have, you're also the chair of CURED, and you're vice chair of CURED, which is Community
United for Reparations and Economic Development.
Yes, Community United under for Reparations and Economic Development. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
So what brings you here today? What are you both doing? Talk to the folks. Let them know.
Well, we are in Boston, flying in from St. Petersburg, Florida, which we are based in. And we are here for the third part of the, is it 6 or 7 day tour? Five days tour? Okay. Of the 5-day tour, Days in Solidarity with African People. And it's the African People Solidarity Committee and the Uhuru Solidarity Movement that work under the leadership of the African Socialist Party. They have this tour every single year, winning the stands of reparations to African people and winning white people and basically letting white people know, that you can be a part of, history and part of the African liberation struggle, that you have a place and you can rejoin humanity under the leadership of African people and working to, recruit white people into this work and to take back all the stolen resources to return them back to African people. So that's what we're here in Boston to do. The Day of Solidarity with African People tour event for Boston is on tomorrow, starting at 7 p.m.
Yeah, and that's in JP at the First Baptist Church. And I have to say that I am sitting here in so much awe of the two of you, because I've been following along to what you're doing down in St. Petersburg, what you've been doing that has really taken off around the world. I mean, people from around, you've inspired so many, including me, and I just want to thank you for your hard work, because it is. You've made people feel uncomfortable. I think it's important to do that. We need to touch and poke and allow to surface all that society seems to have forgotten about, which is the imbued privilege of white people over the Black community. So what you're doing is really speaking for the marginalized, and that's important. And so I want to thank you for that. And so talk a little bit about, so this is the event. It's the Days in Solidarity with African People. Tomorrow, 6:30, for those of you that can come. Talk about, for those at home that aren't aware of reparations, what do you mean by unity through reparations?
Well, in St. Pete, that's actually where we got the slogan, because I ran for District 6 City Council and Jesse ran for mayor. And it's a majority white city, St. Petersburg, Florida, the 5th largest city in Florida. And we ran on the slogan Unity Through Reparations, and that was mainly Jesse's slogan, because it was a call to this majority white city that the divide that we experience, because the reality is there are two Americas that white people and then colonized African people experience, because white people are living at the expense of African people. That's been true historically, and that's the case today. And even in a city like St. Petersburg, Florida, that is the case, where you have the Black community being gentrified out of existence, and police running rampant throughout the Black community and murdering Black children, and there being no genuine source of economic development. But meanwhile, you go streets down and you see prosperity for white people. You see all these bikes and these bike lanes and rental bikes, and you see all these breweries and all these coffee shops and an entire nightlife and all these different things that African people don't have. And we understand that that's a relationship that's based on a parasitic social system founded on the enslavement of African people that carries out into today. And we saw it in St. Pete. So the slogan "Unity through Reparations" was a call to white people to say, that the white community, one, has to take responsibility for that reality and can no longer be complicit in the oppression of African people. And in order to take a principled stance, and in order to, I don't want to be isolated from humanity. I don't want, to be the most hated, despicable person on the planet Earth. That I don't want to see another African child gunned down in my name. My principled stance is through reparations out of people, and then through reparations, the entire city of St. Pete can be prosperous. Everybody can see prosperity, no one living at the expense of anybody else. And through reparations, we were talking about economic development for the African community in the hands of the Black community, because so often you get economic development, you get these handouts that don't last or have any real genuine substance. But when it's owned and controlled by African people, and specifically African workers, then it becomes, African people have the capacity to be self-determined. And, we were saying reparations, there's this baseball dome called the Tropicana Field Baseball Stadium that was built on top of the oldest Black community in St. Pete. It was completely crushed. It destroyed all its homes, over 100 Black-owned businesses there. They crushed it. And now there's a baseball dome. And the team that plays there wants to leave. And we said they can go, and the land under the Tropicana Field needs to go back to the Black community so that we can build, affordable housing and economic development and things like that. So that's what Unity through Reparations was in St. Pete. And now we're carrying it out into the rest of the world because, like you said, it was a campaign that impacted the globe.
Yeah.
And so now it's what we're carrying through because it's the same thing. It's for white people everywhere to understand that unity is possible, but it's only possible through reparations to African people.
Beautiful. Well said. Thank you so much. And yeah, there's a lot of hope in this. You've organized in such a way that really is a lot of power in what you're doing. And I absolutely 100% support it. And so many do. So many do. So talk a bit about Cured. What is Cured exactly? And what is it? Is it a program? There's some sort of structure and to it.
Well, first, I just really want to appreciate having this opportunity to talk to the people.
Yes.
And to be on this platform, and I want to thank you for using this platform to spread the message of solidarity movement, reparations struggle throughout the time that Boston has been a place where we've been organizing solidarity. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
And I also just want to say that it's been an honor to be on this tour with Akile. And Akile is the chair, and I am the vice chair of Communities United for Reparations and Economic Development, CURED, which is an extension of the campaign that was just wrapped up in St. Petersburg, Florida. And the structure of it, the fact that Akile is the leader of CURED and I work under the leadership, is a reflection of the political structure of the campaign itself. That even though I was running for mayor and Akile was running for city council in District 6, anyone who experienced that campaign knew from the beginning that the strategic leadership of that campaign was Akile, was the Black working class, and that the white people in the movement, that we were under the leadership and under the agenda of the Black working class. And because that was the solution to the problems of everyone in the city. Just the same way that the oppression of the Black community has been central to the maintenance of this oppressive social system for its entire existence, that reparations to the Black community is going to be central to overturning this oppressive social system. And that's going to be, just as the oppression of the Black community has been at the core of a system that causes damage to many people in the city of St. Petersburg, where environmental wreckage has been caused by the current mayor that dumped 300 million gallons of sewage all over the city. That affects everybody in the city. The core of that system is the oppression of the Black community. So the core of the solution has to be reparations to the Black community. And that was a message that resonated far and wide, including amongst white people. And we had, just a few days after white nationalists made international headlines in Charlottesville by marching through with tiki torches, chanting white nationalist slogans, we had hundreds of white people in St. Petersburg, Florida, marching behind the leadership of Akile, saying unity through reparations. So to consolidate that momentum the organization Cured has been formed. And the purpose of Cured is to continue to influence public policy and ultimately to continue running candidates for office and winning elections based on this progressive agenda of unity through reparations.
And can I just add that, Cured is a very important strategy because it's another front of the African liberation struggle. And by saying that, what I mean is the African People's Socialist Party, I'm a member of the African People's Socialist Party. And under the umbrella of APSP are all the different organizations and institutions that go to forwarding, the agenda of APSP, which is, total liberation of Africa and African people. And under that falls APSC, African Solidarity Committee, Uhuru Solidarity Movement, and now Cured. And Cured, so on, these different institutions and organizations, they tackle different, and they take up as much political space as we possibly can, because we understand that we have to take up all the democratic space that is allotted to us, and that the electoral front is no different. And the reality is APSP understands that voting is not going to set African people free, and that we can't vote our way out of this, and that's just the reality of it. It's bourgeois politics, and it's great in the context of the social system. But what it can do, and what it did do, is, it won unity with reparations to African people, and it was just this whole platform that we interrupted because they thought it could be business as usual and the electoral process, and it couldn't have been because we shattered the decorum and we forced the agenda and the conversation of the African working class into the mainstream. And that's the understanding that APSP has when we enter into bourgeois elections. It's not because we believe that if we win District 6 in May or seat, that all of a sudden the revolution is here and African people are free. But it's understanding that this is just another factor to forwarding that agenda for total liberation. And because just even knowing the history of the electoral system itself, knowing that it's rigged against African people, and that African people were fighting and were bloodied and murdered for the so-called right to vote. And when African people were even given the right to vote, all of the leaders at that time had been killed and assassinated. We're talking about Malcolm X, the Black Panther Party, anybody with a revolutionary agenda had been killed. And then African people had the right to vote, and the Democratic Party was thrust in front of us. And that's when we had nothing to vote for. So, of course, we understand that that's not going to be the solution, but what it can do is bring more people to revolutionary conclusions. And so that's why, another reason why Cured is here, because it's constantly asserting ourselves into this arena, constantly shaking it up, and even winning, because we intend to win these seats, because we intend to put this platform into full effect and, make it that much easier for African people to be able to see power in their own lives. So I just wanted to elaborate on that because we just have to understand our movement stands on, the whole electoral process itself, and that Cured is going to be able to tackle that electoral front.
Yes, wonderful. It was 50 years ago, just a few days ago, that the Black Panther Party was infiltrated, I believe, by the United States government. And can you give those that are tuning in, talk a little bit about what the Black Panther Party, what were they trying to do for the Black community, and why were they targeted?
Right. Well, I don't know if you saw this thing now out of the FBI, and it's now Black Identity Extremists. And it's literally talking about how, the FBI is looking into all these different organizations and categorizing them as domestic terrorists. And it's the same thing that the Black Panther Party was deemed during its period. And, one thing about the Black Panther Party was, well, obviously it was something that was fighting for an agenda for the African working class. And it also wasn't calling for some, we got to hold hands and, protest peacefully and all this, and sing Kumbaya with our oppressor. It wasn't like that. It was African people have the right to exist, and that African people have to be free by any means necessary. And it was also putting in place programs that allowed African people to be self-determining. And it was this whole program that the Black Panther Party had, and other revolutionary organizations like it, because during the era of the Black Panther Party, there were also, different rising organizations like the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, which the founder of APSP, Chairman Malia Chatella, was actually a part of in St. Petersburg, Florida. And then there was the junta of militant organizations that the chairman created, and then APSP afterwards. So, but with the Black Panther Party in particular, they were labeled domestic terrorist organization by the U.S. government, by the FBI. They were the greatest threat to national security. And by the way, our campaigns were labeled domestic terrorists in St. Petersburg, Florida, by the Democratic Party's chair.
Yep.
Yeah, so it was, very interesting. But you see what happens when you label organizations domestic terrorists, then that gives them the ability to commit the counterinsurgency against your organization. And that's exactly what they did. The COINTELPRO, which was a counterinsurgency of the Black Panther Party, they just killed it from the inside out. And, they murdered people like 3P Newton, Bobby Hutton, and Fred Hampton, and just crushed that movement. And then not only crushed them, then the crack epidemic, crack cocaine was pumped into the African community. And, it was just an extension of the counterinsurgency against African people, because you had this revolutionary organization crushed, but it doesn't necessarily mean that, African people won't resist. So what you have to do now is take it a step further and say, okay, we're going to attack the African community so much so that they're demoralized and completely pushed out of political life. So from that period of time, African people were not participating in political life because they saw all their leaders killed and put in prisons and, all doped up on cocaine and these different things like that. And that was all the U.S. government is doing. And it was all to make sure that, because the U.S. government has this understanding that all of their material interests rest on the pedestal of the oppression of African people, rest on the resources that are stolen from African people. So if African people say, I'm taking my resources back, that's the end of the U.S. government. It can't function like it has, for centuries, because it's functioned on the backs of African people. African people say, you can't be a parasite on me anymore. I'm cutting off this relationship. The U.S. government, the whole U.S., whatever, this whole entity, and, the whole social system built on, colonialism, imperialism, and parasitic capitalism is destroyed. That's where their material interests lie. So that's why they have to crush revolutionary movements that build a consciousness and the capacity for African people to be able to take back their resources and be self-governing. And that's because their futures are tied to imperialism. So that's what we saw in the 60s, and we're seeing that even today with the rise of the consciousness of African people in this country, around the world, and of colonized people everywhere. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's people rising up everywhere you go saying you cannot, that's why the U.S. can't go into these different countries and say, okay, well, we're going to do this and that. Like, they have to negotiate now. That's something that the U.S. has never had to do in history. Now they have to do that because, people are fighting back for the right to their own lives and their own resources. So, and now the FBI has something called Black Identity Extremists, and identifying those as domestic terrorists. So you're even a threat if you're even identifying as being Black, because that's also a threat to imperialism for African people to be able to identify as a nation of people and to be able to disassociate themselves from this colonial identity called African American or whatever identities that, colonialism has granted African people. So, yeah.
So this is something that's really powerful, and it's bringing a lot of hope to generations of young black children. And wow, what a leader! I am in awe of you, by the way, Akile. In awe. And so, I guess what's the Uhuru Solidarity Movement? How long has it been around? What's the history?
Well, we take it back to 1976.
1976, okay.
So the African People's Socialist Party was actually founded by Chairman Malia Chatella in 1972. And before that, as Akile mentioned, the chairman was part of the civil rights movement, and then turned into the Black Power struggle in the 60s. And he was actually the leader of an organization called the Junta Mills Organization. And then that merged with two other organizations in 1972 to form the African People's Socialist Party. And that was, we talk about the counterinsurgency. The African People's Socialist Party was formed 3 years after the FBI and the Chicago police busted into the home of Fred Hampton, who was the chairman of the Chicago Black Panther Party, and shot him dead in his bed, drugged him and shot him dead in his bed. And, this is a very infamous example of the counterinsurgency war against the Black Power movement, where, he was in bed next to his pregnant wife, and they dragged him off the mattress and said he's still alive, and then shot him 3 more times and said he's good and dead now. This is what the state, this is what the U.S. government did to crush the movement of African people for reclaiming their power and resources and their happiness and the future of their children. So if you can imagine in that political environment, the courage and the long view that Chairman Nevel had to form a revolutionary party of the African working class in 1972. And his mission was to rebuild the Black Revolution, to complete the Black Revolution in the 60s, recognizing that the revolution had been militarily crushed in the 1960s and had to be rebuilt from the bottom up. So he formed the party in 1972, and then in 1976, he called a meeting of white people who had shown support for the movement and for the African People's Socialist Party to form an organization called the African People's Solidarity Committee. So actually, the 41st anniversary of the African People's Solidarity Committee was just a few weeks ago. And it was founded in St. Petersburg, Florida in 1976. And that was where the chairman started to lay out the basis for a principled relationship from the white population to the African liberation movement. And it was based on the fact that, as the chairman started in his writings and in his speeches, he started to expose that, the history of capitalism is not just like bankers and rich white people doing bad things to the rest of the world. It's the general white population has played a role. We have been complicit, and in many cases, we have been enthusiastic leaders and participants in the violence and gore and bloodshed that gave birth to the entire U.S. and European social system, and that has enriched the entire white population from the lowliest white worker to the richest Donald Trump. The entire spectrum of white society has, to varying degrees, benefited materially from that attack on Africa, the enslavement of African people who were transformed into the first commodity that was sold on the stock market, as African human beings. That's where the stock market had its origins. In Europe, where we were in the dark ages, quote unquote, while the rest of the planet had vibrant, beautiful, flourishing civilizations. And what changed that, what basically turned that upside down, was this assault on Africa and genocide against the indigenous people of this land, which the party and the chairman always acknowledges that this is the land of the indigenous people. It's as true today as it was when we first stole it. Just like Palestine is still the land of the Palestinian people, this is the land of the indigenous people. And when all this is said and done, this land is going to have to be back in the hands of the indigenous people. So all of these understandings gave birth to the African People's Solidarity Committee to say that the role for white people as recognizing that we are part of an oppressor society, like our entire nation, our entire global white community, if you will, is built on oppression. And the way to end that, the way to rectify the relationship that we've had to African people and the rest of the planet for the last 600 years, is through reparations to African people.
Yes.
So the Solidarity Committee was built on that premise, and Penny Hess was present at that meeting in 1976, and she continues to lead the work of the African People's Solidarity Committee under the leadership of the party and Chairman Nevel 41 years later. And she's going to be one of the keynote speakers at
this event tomorrow.
Tomorrow, yes.
Wow. Oh, so good what you're doing, the message that you're getting out. I think all too often people are so oppressed that they forget, or that maybe they are ignorant, they don't understand exactly, how imbued this society is with privilege, and then on the backs of enslaved Black men and women, and how it's just so deeply embedded in this country. It's sick. I look around at all of this, wealth, and it's it's really pretty disgusting.
Can I say one thing?
And I'm sorry, yeah.
Well, one thing that, just in terms of like the theory of African internationalism, which is the political philosophy which guides this movement and which was formed by Chairman Amali Shatella, one thing that the chairman talks about is that privilege, what we typically refer to as privilege, is an expression of power. And the only reason why white people would have what we refer to as privileges is because of the material relationship of white power. So the destruction of white power, the destruction of a colonial social system, which colonialism is that system where the entire white population is benefiting off of blood-sucking and oppression and exploitation of the African community, that renders the privilege of white people inconsequential. It robs the privilege of any meaning when the power base of that privilege is overturned. And that's why reparations has to be the basis of a genuine anti-imperialist, progressive, revolutionary stance from white people.
Yeah, it's common sense. I mean,
yes.
Just like an understanding too, for those that are tuning in, I mean, you mentioned, we were talking earlier about, in the 60s and 70s, the Black communities, were infiltrated and lots of drugs were pushed on these, young men and women. And that was to eradicate them and put them in jail and to get them, have them sort of be a part of the prison industrial complex, which is slavery. That's a whole other topic. But so now you have all of these young white men and women that are dying of this opioid crisis, and it's a public health issue.
Right.
So, but it wasn't looked at the same way in the 70s and 80s. It wasn't looked at with compassion. Instead, it was like, oh, let's get everyone sick, and then put them in jail, and they're criminals. Like, I just am so appalled at the state of the world, and up until now, because what you're doing is so important. This is unlike anything I've ever seen, been a part of, and I'm so happy that you brought this to light. I'm so grateful to have met Casey and all of them, to have discovered what's going on, because I think that if you're tuning in, join, get in touch, go to the Uhuru Solidarity Movement. It's uhurusolidarity.org. You can also, just show up tomorrow to this event. Listen to Amali Shatella. Listen to Penny. Jesse and Akile will be there. We'll all be there. It's really time to stop this white nationalism. A call for all white people to stop gentrification, end police violence with a genuine stand for reparations, Black community control of schools, police, and healthcare. What's interesting, I want to talk a little bit about that. How can we start to have influence? Like, for instance, I'm interested in this, in Black community control of schools, police, and healthcare. What would I do? How would I go about implementing that in my own community?
Well, I'd like to answer that and also just address what you were just saying about the drug thing.
Yeah.
I think they're connected, and that's a really important point.
Yes.
Just quickly on the whole drug issue, that what you said is absolutely true, that the war on drugs was a war against the Black community.
Yes.
And you have two sets of laws, basically. You have a legal system as it is applied to white people, and you have a legal system as it is applied to the colonized African community. And like you said, they used crack cocaine as a weapon against the Black community. And that was used, first actually it was heroin. They used heroin during the war on Vietnam. Because the U.S. is always engaged in two forms of warfare. So when they were at war in Vietnam, attempting to crush, ultimately they were defeated, attempting to crush the courageous Vietnamese people in their war for national liberation, they were taking heroin from the so-called Golden Triangle in Indochina, and they were bringing it to the U.S. and using it to salt the earth and poison the poor and oppressed African working class. So they were at war against the Black community, against the Black Power movement on one front, and they were at war against Vietnam on another front. And then after that, they were at war against the Sandinistas in Nicaragua and against revolutionary movements in Honduras. And while they were at war against them, they were trafficking cocaine. I'm talking about, when I say they, I'm talking about the CIA. The CIA is the #1 crack dealer on the planet Earth, and that is not a conspiracy theory. That is a matter of historical record. The CIA, the U.S. government has practically admitted that they trafficked cocaine into the United States, they turned it into crack, and they flooded black communities in Los Angeles and other places in California as a means of chemical warfare to poison and demoralize and crush the will of the people to fight back and even to survive. And that was a genocidal assault on the colonized African community inside this country. And then now, of course, you're seeing the explosion of, opiates and heroin is coming back and stuff like that. And it's not a coincidence that comes off the heels of the U.S. war against Afghanistan, where opium production was literally banned by the previous regime before the U.S. went in and overthrew them, and now opium production is skyrocketing in Afghanistan. So this part of U.S. imperialism always has been, and of course now in this crisis of imperialism, we are seeing, which is caused by people fighting back all over the planet, we are seeing white people just in a complete state of despair and anxiety and fear about the future, who are using drugs or committing suicide or engaging in other forms of self-destruction, that from the lens of the social system itself, it makes perfect sense that you would not be able to see a future through this social system. And that's why, you use the word hopeful. And that was one of the key experiences that we had with the campaign in St. Pete, that you had white people who came into contact with this movement, came into contact with Akile, the Uhuru movement, with this campaign, and with the Unity Through Reparations slogan, and they said that it gave them happiness. Like, it was the first time they had felt happy in years, because they felt hopeful, they felt optimistic, they restored their hope in the future of humanity. And that's what reparations does. Reparations is the solution for the entire planet, and it's the way for white people to not go down with the sinking ship of this social system, which is going down. Good, it should.
Yes.
And we don't have to go down with it. So, and in terms of
Okay.
In terms of black community controlled schools, police, and healthcare, perhaps Akile can speak to how the movement is implementing those things. But in terms of what we can do, reparations, joining the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, organizing in whatever city that you're located in, and building a branch of the Uhuru Solidarity. What we do is we raise money in the white community as reparations, and all of the resources that we raise is turned over to the programs of Black Star Industries and the work of the African People's Socialist Party to build black community control of schools, police, and healthcare. So the only thing standing in the way of African people in having those things is that their resources have been stolen from them.
Yeah. And just to speak to that just the whole resources and not having resources, because it doesn't come in African people's inability to be able to lead. It comes in the fact that African people don't have resources, we don't have buildings, we don't have all these things. To, if we wanted to implement black community controlled schools, we wouldn't have a building to make a school happen. And, the same thing would be for, police and all these different kinds of things. And healthcare and being able to take care of the African community, you need resources to do that. But of course, all the wealth has been stolen from African people. So that's why reparations, the Uhuru Solidarity Movement is so critical in turning back over those stolen resources. And that Black Star Industries is, and APSP overall is heavily engaged in making these programs a reality. And, to meet some of the, the needs of African people, what APSP and Black Star Industries have done, we have multiple institutions, economic development institutions for African people. In St. Petersburg, Florida, we have the Uhuru House, which is actually a rental. We have the Apollo Hall, which is a rental space. People can go and buy, rent the space for birthday parties and all these different kinds of things. We have a Uhuru Jiko kitchen. Jiko is kitchen in Swahili, and it's a commercial kitchen. So people can come in, cook their foods if they're caterers or anything like that, or just use the kitchen. And then we have Black Power 96.3 FM, which is a low-power radio station, an FM radio station. And there's also an app, Black Power 96. Just Black Power 96 on any app. And it's our own radio station, because it plays because we understand the importance of agitation and propaganda, and having our own voice and taking back our own culture and all these different kinds of things plays a critical role in the African revolution. You also have the Burning Spear newspaper, which is the oldest revolutionary newspaper in existence, and it basically says everything that we're talking about, and also sums up the conditions of the world, different pop culture, all these different kinds of things summed up in that newspaper in the theory of African internationalism. And it's distributed all around the world, including prisons. And that's just St. Pete. And then you go to Oakland, California. There's a Uhuru house in Oakland, California, a alcohol rental space, and there's also a furniture store, a Uhuru furniture store and collectibles, and there's also a furniture store in Oakland, California. Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and also they just got done in Philly with this amazing book fair and marketplace.
Yeah, I saw a video of that. That was beautiful.
Yeah, and I mean it's put on, and you know, the leadership of all the economic development institutions is Ona's Anai, she's the deputy chairwoman of the African Socialist Party. So all the economic development institutions you see throughout our party is under her leadership. And we also have Uhuru Foods and Pies, which, you know, is we have a seasonal pie campaign where people are selling pies like crazy. And, you know, all the resources go back into building economic development for the African community. And now in St. Louis, after the murder of Mike Brown, after the rebellion, the courageous resistance of the African working class there, the Uhuru movement has created a foundation in St. Louis. And now we have an Uhuru house coming in St. Louis. We have a Uhuru Chico and Bakery Cafe coming to St. Louis. And we've also acquired different properties that we can build night markets and festivals on. And, you know, just different institutions that are owned and controlled by the African working class so that we can start implementing things like Black community control of the police, Black community control of the schools, etc. So.
Seems to be thriving. That people are starting to catch on to how important this is. Now talk about, I've heard about Reparations Challenge. In fact, I'm sort of beginning to put together some ideas now for one that I'd like to throw. For those that are interested in doing a Reparations Challenge, what is it exactly? What is a Reparations Challenge?
So, a Reparations Challenge is a project of the Uhuru Solidarity Movement, and it is basically a call to any white person, wherever you're located on the planet, that you can start raising money for the work of Black Star Industries. And it's part of building what we call a culture of reparations to African people, a revolutionary culture of reparations to African people. So if you're a white person and you are a singer, or you are a dancer, or you are a DJ, as we have here in Boston, or a painter, or a dancer. I said that, yes. We have a dancer and
a baker.
A baker, yes.
A clockmaker.
A clockmaker. Whatever, yes, anything, any skill, interest that you have can become a fundraiser for reparations to Africa. And that's what the Reparations Challenge is about. And everything that we just named, people have done those things. We've had, you know, dance parties, and a lot of those happened here in Boston, and also in New York. We even had somebody who did a make-your-own chocolate workshop a few years ago. We've had, you know, just all kinds of things that people have done just to raise resources. One of our comrades in St. Pete actually published a poetry book that is sold as a fundraiser for the work of Black Star Industries. We have a whole website called Art for Reparations, where people who are in solidarity movement, who are artists, put up their work, their music, their paintings, and stuff like that, and sell that as a fundraiser for the work of Black Star Industries. So that's the Reparations Challenge.
Oh, very nice. Okay. We understand, you know, there's some comments coming through. We understand that there's grief around the world, but I think addressing this, what the Uhuru Solidarity Movement is doing under the leadership of the Black African Socialist Party, is the beginning of addressing, and I think what you're doing has is having such an incredible impact, and could get to the root of oppression and grief around the world. I mean, you are really, you know, this white imperialistic sort of, it's a toxic masculinity too, you know, this toxic way of life that is, it's a sinking ship, and I don't want to be on it. And I think that all of you tuning in likely don't want to be on it either. So,
and just to speak to the mission of the Uhuru movement and the African Socialist Party. It's to end all forms of oppression. And that starts with overturning this social system that's built on the most heinous acts of violence ever committed in human history. And that when we're talking about African liberation, we're talking about, freeing the world. Because, all around, throughout history, different countries and nations have had revolutions. But it has always, been, one, you still live in a system of capitalism, one, and African people aren't free. And that's where the whole foundation of it all rests, and that the whole globe participates in this parasitic economy of capitalism that was built. The first commodity of capitalism was an African human being, body, which was sold. And it takes the revolution of African people to overturn all the conditions of, just this whole social system that we see around the world. And so when we say free African people, and when we say that that revolution is the only solution, we're saying that as a result of African people being free, the indigenous land has to be returned back to indigenous people. Mexico has to be returned back to Mexican people. We're saying Palestine has to be free. We're saying that, no more U.S. imperialist wars on, countries in the Middle East, and, no more carving up Africa and stealing African resources. No more, war against Vietnam, China against Korea. That all of that ceases to exist with the revolution. That's what we're talking about. We're saying that African people have to be free. That includes the whole world.
This is a global initiative, global movement.
Right. It's because the social system that we're talking about, African people are engaged in overturning this whole social system. And the social system oppresses everything around the world. It kills everything. It kills the environment. It kills animals. It kills everything. It is death. It is death, and African people are putting the nail in the coffin of imperialism. And that's what we are engaged in. And that has to be, the struggle that everybody is engaged in. And it has to be a struggle against colonialism, against parasitic capitalism, against imperialism. That's the only way the whole world can be free. That's what the African Revolution, that's what African Socialist Party is engaged in. And so if you understand that, then you see that we're fighting on every front, so that different countries aren't no longer being bombed by U.S. imperialism. That can't be the reality anymore. So this is what we're being engaged in, and it's a cliche. Like, I don't want to be cliche and say like African people, like, this movement's fighting for everybody kind of thing, but that's the reality of it. We're fighting for the entire world because humanity and the planet Earth can't stand another 100 years of the system. It cannot. It's proving that to people every single day. So, that's our mission, is to be a free people and to free this world and to have, a life where we don't have to, we just live in the worst kinds of conditions and worry about where your next meal is going to come from, and worry about whether your child's going to be safe, and calling yourself a name that's not your name, and, all these different kinds of things, and just tragedy after tragedy. We want a world free of that, and we know it's possible. And that's why the vision is so positive, and that it provides hope, because that's the future of it all. And people, in particular white people, are, they get, have suffered the opioid addiction, they're drinking themselves to death, committing suicide, and all these different kinds of things, because they don't see a future. Meanwhile, everybody who's trying to overturn the system sees a future, and that's why they're fighting to overturn it, because they know the future lies outside of this. And so white people realize that their future doesn't have to be the booze and the opioids and death. That doesn't have to be imperialism. It can be a free world, under the leadership of the African working class.
Yeah.
Can we answer the questions?
Oh, sure, yeah. So we have...
I have a response to this. Somebody's asking about NATO and Serbia.
Yeah, do you want to touch on that? The first, so the comment, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So yeah, I saw some comments asking why we're not advocating for reparations to nations affected by NATO, and also saying that the people who were bombed in Serbia should be on the forefront of this movement, considering they were the first to lift arms and suffer for it. So just to say that, the NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, was originally consolidated to unite white power governments in the imperialist assault on the rest of the planet. That's the origin of NATO. So solidarity with African liberation is definitely a stance against the existence of NATO. And the victims of NATO in recent history and throughout its duration have largely included African people, especially on the continent of Africa, like in Libya, in the past, several years, where NATO, in collusion with the U.S. government, waged a genocidal war against the people of Libya and assassinated their leader, Muammar Gaddafi, and lynched him, and tortured him, and raped him. Of course, Hillary Clinton famously went on TV and laughed about that. So this movement is 100% in solidarity with people who have been bombed by the imperialist organization known as NATO. And as far as the people of Serbia who were devastated and attacked by NATO, that the Uhuru movement has always united with and defended anyone who is under attack by imperialism, no matter what. This movement has always, the African People's Socialist Party has always united with and defended anyone who comes under attack by U.S. imperialism, while also recognizing that the foundation of those attacks is the initial attack and the ongoing attack on Africa and African people. And for white people in various parts of Europe and also in Serbia and places like that, who have at various times in history faced the end of the barrel of the gun of Western imperialism, the solution is to unite with the struggle of African people to destroy the whole system altogether, so that nobody has to face the wrath of U.S. imperialism. And the only social force that can truly lead that struggle to its ultimate conclusion is the African working class. And that's why all white people everywhere owe reparations to African people, and all white people everywhere, including throughout Eastern Europe, should be under the leadership of the African Revolution and forwarding a genuine international revolutionary struggle to destroy U.S. imperialism. So those of you who are watching from Serbia, join us. Join the Uhuru Solidarity Movement.
Yeah.
We invite you. You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Wow. Yeah. I guess we have about 15 or so minutes left, and so I kind of want to talk about you're the chair for the Justice for the Three John Black girls that I've been really following along with, because that was really it was powerful. Those beautiful young 15-year-old girls that were chased down by 5 to 7 Pinellas County sheriffs into a. Can you talk a little bit about that? Thank you. Yeah, if you could just touch on that a little, that would be great for those that are tuning in that aren't aware of it.
So March 31st of last year, the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department chased and corralled 3 young African girls, Dominique Battle, Anaya Miller, and Shanti Butler, all 16 and 15 years old. And they chased these girls in the dead of night, and for, in their reports, for a multitude of reasons, all of them contradicting each other. Mm-hmm. At one point, it was because their headlights were off, despite the headlights being on in video. And they illegally pursued the girls because there's a no chase policy in Florida. And so the deputies aren't supposed to chase, cars because it puts people at risk. And because it can end up in death. And the lead deputy, actually, who was no stranger to killing African people, his name is Howard Skaggs, and he was actually he wasn't convicted, but it was ruled a justifiable homicide for another African, 18 years old, Boyle Felton, who was murdered in 2002 he was beaten to death and drowned in a pond. And the same deputy, Howard Skaggs, was the lead car in chasing these 3 girls into a pond. And he had even at one point radioed his superiors and said, can I pursue this chase? And they said, no, cut off all the chase. And he did it anyway. And he just radioed his back. They have this thing called the Wolf Pack, which is a DUI task force. He just radioed them for backup so they could all participate in rounding up the girls and know. So they were putting out all these different blocks, different exits, so the girls couldn't escape. And this is what we mean by corralling. They made sure that the girls couldn't escape any other way, and they ended up going down this winding dirt path that led to a cemetery pond. And Skaggs knows the pond very well, and in fact, in his car over the radio, he said, there's no way out. It's a dead end. I know this place like the back of my hand, because he actually staged a lot of his arrests there. Like, he would wait there for cars to speed and then go out and arrest people. So he knew that it would end up in a pond, and yet he corralled these girls, knowing that information. He also knew this winding path, dangerous, dark, and going 35 miles per hour on that path is extremely dangerous, and you can't see the pond. And the girls, and we believe that the girls were pushed into the pond because the bumper of the car was hit, and it would seem like they were rammed into the pond. So the car goes 15 feet into the water, or 15 feet from shore, into the water. And there's 17 at the end of this chase where the girls are in the water. There's 17 sheriff's deputies standing around the girls. All of them are trained as first responders, and first responders are people who are trained in water rescue, and they're equipped with tools to engage in a water rescue just in case something like this happens. So they have things that break windows, and also the seats in their cars, the sheriff's cars, act as flotation devices. None of these things are utilized. There was even a helicopter a sheriff's helicopter over the scene, and none of these things were utilized. So for 6 minutes, the girls bobbed over the water. They had and then just to be in that situation of knowing you have 17 sheriff's deputies surrounding you, listening to you scream, and nobody's doing anything. Nobody's jumping into the water to save you. And so, the girls knew basically that was the end for them. And so much so that when they went to take the car out of the water, they had to pry the girls' hands apart because they were holding on to each other during their last moments. And in the video, you can hear sheriff's deputies saying, they're having this disgusting conversation to the side, being really cynical, saying, "Do you hear that? I think I hear screaming. Did you hear something?" And then another deputy going, "Nothing anymore, dude. They're 6'7". They're effing done. 6'7" means they're dead." So, this is the kind of callous conversation that they were having as these girls were dying. And so, as a result of that brutal murder, and they had attempted to cover it up. Skaggs went in, and the sheriff, the head sheriff of the department, they're preparing the slander campaign that they will wage against the girls to justify them dying. And so, the next day, before we even had their names, before we even knew, and as this is happening, as they're throwing out these girls' mugshots and their criminal records for everybody to see, the mother of Dominique Battle is at work. So, and she doesn't even know her child is dead.
And that's Kunde.
That's Kunde.
Yeah.
Kunde Mwambita. She doesn't even know her child has been murdered. And she's at work, and they go to her job, and they start berating her, harassing her, asking her questions about her daughter, like, "Do you know who your daughter is? And do you know what she's wearing?" All this kinds of stuff. And attacking this mother who, at the end of this conversation, you have to say, "Your daughter is no longer here." And so it was, it's a horror, but that's colonial violence. That is what African community has to face, and that's what African children, have to be confronted with. And, they put out all these lies about a stolen car. The girl stole the car. And so at first, Deputy Skaggs was stopping them because their headlights were off. But now that story didn't work out. So he's had to say the car was stolen. And the guy they said they stole a car from says that he picked up the girls around 2 a.m. in the morning. It's a grown-ass man in his 30s picking up teenage girls and takes them to a Walmart and says he's buying a TV at 2 a.m. at a Walmart that doesn't sell televisions. And he comes out with liquor, and the girls take off. So because the girls are dead, we don't know their story, but it's most likely they were running away from a sexual predator.
Yeah.
And we don't know that. And also, they've hidden this guy, this 30-year-old guy. We haven't heard from him. He doesn't exist anymore. And it was a whole thing that they were concocting to justify, because this video was leaked, like it was put out. You know, they hadn't put this out on their own. It was spread, and it started getting national attention. So they had to concoct this story to say, this is what happened. You know, this is why the girls had to die. That's why they had to plaster mugshots everywhere. That's why they had to say the car was stolen. That's why they had to do all these things, despite a sheriff's department's record showing them killing African people, especially African children, notoriously. And that's what they do. They did it in 2002 with Royal Felton. They did it in 2004. Markel McCullough, Jarrell Walker, Javon Dawson. These are all African teenagers that were killed by the sheriff's department.
And no one's been held accountable.
No, nobody has got a slap on the wrist. And then this year, August 6th, 3 teenage African boys were chased to their death by Pinellas County Sheriff's Department. And it ended up in a fiery crash, and the car exploded, and the youngest was 14 years old. And as a result of this no chase policy, they pursued these boys, chased them to their death, and then claimed they never chased them. Despite their own evidence, you know, the thing is, we don't need evidence. I don't need anybody to tell me that in a result of police interaction with African children, the African children are dead. I don't need nothing else to tell me that they're dead.
Yep.
And I don't need to know if they were good boys. They can be bad as hell. I don't give a shit.
Yep.
You know, I know that those boys were murdered because they lived under colonialism.
Exactly.
And the police function as a state of, you know, to keep that social system intact. So I know without a doubt, you know, that those African children were murdered. And that's what happened with the 3 girls. And so we waged this campaign to, you know, not only counter this narrative that was being put out about these girls in the African community in St. Petersburg, also to counter it all around the world, because it was national attention. And but not only to do that, I mean, it's also a campaign that's fighting for reparations, Black community control of the police, and criminal charges against these murderous pigs in the sheriff's department. But also, one of the most significant factors of this campaign is Kunde Mwambita.
Yeah, she has been just so vocal and powerful, and you know, because I think about how many young Black children have died at the hands of these terrible, you know, these sanctions that are put in place to keep everyone in fear. And so Kunde, she has been very, very outspoken and really helpful to so many other mothers who have and fathers who have lost their children at the hands of these awful terrorists that are police officers and judges and mayors and lawyers and all of these white supremacists. You know, they're like they're in places of power, but that power structure is tainted and it's flawed, and you can see it crumbling every day. So this is good, and it's because of the voices of Akile and Kunde and you know, Omale and you know, who's that other? There's another one that she's president of the Uhuru, or no, it's the
Umpita?
Umpita. Yeah, wow, so much power. I mean, when that was going on, when Harvey hit, you know, who was the one that was really vocal about saying, like, go and save my people? There are, like, my people they're dying. Was that Nyabenge? Yeah. So you have all these really beautiful, powerful people that are, you know, shedding light and allowing, you know, just the truth to be seen. You can't cover it up. That's the beauty of the information age that we live in, folks. Look, we're going live right now. This is beautiful with Akile Anai and Jesse Nevel. And tomorrow this is happening. And if you want to hear more and you want to talk to them and you want to understand the importance of this yourselves, please come. The Days in Solidarity with African People is on tour. They're going to be going to New York City after tomorrow's event. They'll be going to New York. So this is something that, you know, you'll be able to catch. Talk a little bit, I guess, about the tour, because we're coming up on the end of the interview, and I want people to know where they can find this.
Well, you can find the information at uhurusolidarity.org, and and also on our Facebook page. Facebook, it's Uhuru Solidarity Movement. You search that, UHURU Solidarity Movement. I see Ryan Fogarty, our powerful comrade in St. Louis. I'm sure he can post a link.
Naya Bingy.
Naya Bingy. Yes.
Uhuru.
Uhuru.
She heard her name.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, so you can find this all
Kunde.
through the
Uhuru
website.
Kunde.
Oh, Uhuru Kunde. Oh my goodness, so much love. So much love. Wow.
Yes, we did.
Wow, I look forward to meeting all of you. Wow, this is just
Thank you, Ryan.
so precious. And yeah, so this is good. So, and I think, you know, at this point, it's just, you know, be aware of what's going on. Don't, you know, don't fall victim to the propaganda that's being spread. These aren't domestic terrorists. These are compassionate, loving people that want to see, you know, the Black community thrive. Because for too long, it has been, yes, exactly, under the oppression and imposed upon by all of these flawed philosophies that continue today. So it is time that we all unite and come together. And you know, the white people need to step up and realize what's going on and join this movement. I wholeheartedly believe that this is what the future is. So just you know, keep faith in your heart. Uhuru means freedom in Swahili.
Yes.
How did that come to be? Why Uhuru? Why?
Well, have you ever heard of the Mau Mau?
No.
Well, the Mau Mau, where did they originate out of?
Kenya.
Kenya.
Okay.
The freedom fighters in Kenya. And Uhuru was the word that, I mean, well, Uhuru is a word in this movement that we use, you know, to greet each other and say hello, goodbye, all these different kinds of things. And but it was a word from the Kenyan Freedom Army, the Mau Mau. And, you know, when, like, they would capture African women and they would brutalize them and, you know, do horrible, I don't want to say it, but just horrible things to them in captivity so that the African women would, you know, spill where the men were and where the soldiers were, you know, just basically just give up their positions and, you know, like give them intel, and they refused to. And so while experiencing this pain and the suffering, they would scream, Uhuru, 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 you know, and just to protect the revolution. And so, you know, that's just what the Uhuru movement has adopted, and also because freedom should be on our mind every, you know, every second, every minute, every hour, because we understand that's something that we can't live without, and that we have to just really internalize that. And saying Uhuru reinforces that for everybody, including when you say it to other people, they're just like, Uhuru, like Uhuru.
Uhuru.
It's the most loving word.
It
like
is.
It's better than hello. It's better than goodbye. It's Uhuru. Freedom, all the time.
And there is freedom through unity, and that's one of your biggest, you know, unity through reparations. And there's freedom in that. So stand with solidarity. Black power matters, which is really powerful. And I think that should be something that really gets a lot of attention. You know, let us put an end to all this blatant slavery that's happening. You know, all of these poor families that have been torn apart by agencies put in place to just tear and weaken. But the beauty of the African community is you can't weaken.
600 years resilient.
Yeah, so you can't weaken them. So yeah, this is beautiful. I just want to thank you both so much again for being on the show, for sharing. Knowledge is power. Keep, you know, education is key. Just keep talking about it. Just spread the message and make it aware.
Oh wait, no. Yeah, get my bag.
Yes.
I got some literature.
All right,
Literature. I can repeat the details.
Yes,
Of
please.
Tomorrow. So
Yeah.
tomorrow, come join us.
Yes.
Come see the leader of the African Revolution, Chairman Amale Shatella, keynote speaker, Chairwoman Penny Hess of the African People Solidarity Committee, and Akile Anai will be speaking. So you don't want to miss this. And the comrades here in Boston have done incredible work to build this event. So please come out, check it out. It is tomorrow, October 17th, 7 p.m. First Baptist Church in Jamaica Plain at 633 Center Street, and you can register by going to DSAP, DSAP 2017, Boston.eventbrite.com. So DSAP 2017, Boston.eventbrite.com. Register, it's free, and please come check out this powerful event, Day in Solidarity with African People, tomorrow.
And just in terms of being educated, because we know education reinforces the current social system, but you can decolonize your mind. And I just want to encourage everybody who doesn't live in St. Petersburg, Florida, to download the Black Power 96.3 app. Download it. When you type in Black Power, it'll be the first thing to pop up. Also, I'm reading currently Chairman Amali Achitello Speaks right here. But you can purchase Chairman Amali Achitello's works and also works just from the party, also the Burning Spear from burningspearmarketplace.com. So education, the theory of African internationalism, everything that we basically said today is regurgitated African internationalism. So burningspearmarketplace.com, and get you a copy of really anything from that website, and educate yourself on the theory of African internationalism.
Yes.
And Day in Solidarity with African People doesn't end here in Boston. We're coming to a town near you. If you're in New York, we'll be there on Wednesday night. So you can check out uhrusolidarity.org to get more information about that. And we're also going to be, later this month, October 29th, we're going to be back in Florida, in Gainesville, speaking in Florida. And then in November, we're going to be in Huntsville, Alabama. So if you're in any of those places or anywhere near any of those places, come join us and check out more information at uhrusolidarity.org.
Beautiful. Thank you, Uhuru. And this won't be the last time that Akile and Jesse will be on the show. I plan to have them on many, many, many times again into the future. So much love, Uhuru.